All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about gravity and the orbits of our solar system with our planets, and who came up with this idea that they move in an elliptical motion, which is kind of just the idea that it moves in an oval shape pattern versus more of a circular one. So you might remember when we talked about the nebula theory and how Copernicus and Galileo kind of drew out the orbits of the planets more in a circular type motion. Then comes along Kepler, who is kind of the father of elliptical motion. And so he was able to kind of say, I think that the planets move more in an ellipse, and he was able to mathematically prove that with an equation called eocentricity. And so that's what we're going to talk about today: is what is eocentricity, and who is Kepler, and what did he kind of come up with. So in Canvas, if you're following along, we're going to go to our notes on space. And then we're going to click on, we're still in planets and solar system formation. And I went ahead and I already pulled this up so that it's in a nice big shape for us here. Maybe. Come on. There we go. All right. So you might remember we talked a little bit about our nebula theory and the idea that when things are in motion, they can collide. And in certain cases, in most nebulas, a massive star is going to form, and we'll kind of hit on this just even more as we move through this unit. But the idea is that once a star is formed in an area, it's going to be really massive and pull all of that material closer towards itself. And so then we go through these steps where it kind of goes through that formation. And so once again, the idea is that that massive object is going to hold other objects in its grasp. And so we've talked about the idea that if you increase the distance and move things further apart, the less gravitational pull they have on each other. And if you increase the distance, or I'm sorry, if you decrease the distance, then it's going to have a greater gravitational pull. And then also along with that has to do the mass in the radius. So the sun, and we'll talk about this after we kind of visit this idea of the nebular theory, is that the sun is the most massive thing in our solar system. So it is able to hold on to all the different types of things that we're going to be talking about: planets, the Kuiper belt, the Oort belt, comets, meteors, all these different things. And so with that, Kepler, and we'll watch a video on him here in a little bit, has come up with this idea of how planets actually move around. And I like to think of it, if you've ever been to Kings Island, which maybe most of you have been. So think back to when you were little and you were always in Kiddieland. There's a ride there. My kids call it the Ladybug ride. It's technically, I think, called the Whip, but it kind of moves you around in this oval type pattern as you sit in this car. And when you go around the curve part, that's the fun part of the ride, where everyone starts cracking up and laughing because it gets you moving really, really fast. And so Kepler came up with those ideas. So there's a couple of different things we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about our focus, or our foci. And this might sound familiar from maybe a geometry lesson that maybe you have had. And then we're going to talk about this path of the planets, our ellipse. So the sun is always one foci, and our other foci is going to be our planet. So Kepler's first law states that an orbit of every planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the two foci, and that's what's drawn here. It's that the sun is going to be one foci, and our planet is kind of that other part, and then we are going to do the math to sweep out what is the actual elliptical shape of that planet's orbit. Kepler's second law of motion. So this has to do with how that, even though it doesn't look like these two, I want to call them triangles, even though that's not fair, will probably be a better way to describe it. Even though they look extremely different, is that they actually have equal intervals of time. And that's what this is saying right here. A line joining a planet and the sun sweeps out equal areas during equal intervals of time, meaning that from P2 or P1 to P2 into P3 to P4, those are actually the same distance. It's just that, once again, we are looking at an ellipse, and so the sun, when a planet is here, and we can see that the distance is much shorter, is that it's going to whip it around much faster, whereas when it's out here, it's much slower. And we'll talk about this. This is also has to deal with some of our seasons and the way the Earth is tilted. It causes us to have different seasons even in the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere. So once again, Kepler's second law states that an adjoining planet and sun sweep out equal areas during equal intervals of time. So this y to x and w to z are the same, even though we can definitely see that this distance is much further out. So that brings us to our term, which is called eocentricity, and that just means the way a oval is going to be shaped or measured. So we'll do a lab where you will actually draw out 7 different orbits of different planets. And most of them are going to be very eccentric, meaning ellipse. A circle has a perfect eocentricity. So if you draw a circle with a compass, that's a perfect circle. So there it's equal all the way around, whereas an ellipse is not that case. So an ellipse is always going to be something below the number 1. So and that's what this is kind of saying here. Eocentricity may be interpreted as a measure of how much an orbit's shape deviates from a circle, meaning the more circular it looks, or sometimes I think more egg-shaped, if you want to think about it that way. And so there is an equation. We will use it just one time for the lab, and that is it. You do not have to memorize it by any means. You're just going to have to be able to look and say, like, oh, that one's very eccentric, that one's not very eccentric, closer to a circle. But the eocentricity, how we find that is we find the distance from the foci, and then we divide that by the length of our major axis. So let me go back to this picture right here. So this would be our distance from our 2 different foci. And then this dotted line that runs from this side of the ellipse all the way to this side of the ellipse, that would be our major axis. So we are dividing this distance here from our 2 foci from the general ellipse overall that has taken place, and that's going to vary just a little bit depending on what planet we're looking at. Now once again, so distance from the foci and then the length of a major axis. I have a feeling I'm going to have a dog barking here in a minute, so maybe not. She seems intent. Yep, there it is. Circles, so they have a center to them. So let's look at this picture here. So this circle has a center. So therefore, once again, it does not have, actually this is not a perfect circle. It's telling me the eocentricity is 0.017. So this is actually the Earth's orbit. I should read this before I just tell you this. So circles have a center. So therefore, they are perfectly shaped all the way around. They're the same. Where ellipses are like flattened circles that don't have a center, but rather 2 foci. So we would be able to put 2 focuses here and measure out this distance moving around it, or the sweeping distance. Same with here. This is Mars's orbit, and then Pluto's orbit way out here. So eocentricity may be interpreted as a measure of how much an orbit's shape deviates from a circle. For a circle, E equals 0. And for anything else, for an ellipse, it's going to be a lower value than 1. Kepler's third law of motion has to do with the semi-major axis. And so let's kind of talk about this here. So it's the square of a planet's sidereal period, which is just the movement around the sun, is directly proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. So sidereal period is just as it moves around 1 year, what is that difference, or what is the square of that with its major axis? So let me kind of go back to this picture here again. So all the way around, that's the sidereal year, and we want to know what is it in proportion to that major axis. So this law relates to the amount of time for a planet to complete one orbit around the sun to the planet's average distance of the sun. And then, whoops, and there we go. We've got a chart here that kind of talks about it. So our sidereal period, everything is based off the Earth, kind of like our astronomical units as well. Is that one astronomical unit is the distance from the Earth to the sun. Our sidereal years are also based on that too. So, and if you can kind of think about it, is that Venus and Mercury are closer to the sun, so their year is much less than our 365 days, whereas you can see that the years get pretty long on some of these ones that are out there. And then a couple days ago, we even talked about the idea of this planet 9 being out there and how it's orbiting around as well, but it could be greater than this 245 or 248.5 years. So just think, it takes 248 years for Pluto to orbit around. And if there's one even further out there, we might just not be getting a glimpse of it very often. First, because if it's not generating any energy, it's not creating any light. And then how does that look to us when we look at it in satellite images? So it's going to be like a chance finding, but scientists are getting pretty close to kind of thinking it's out there. So these are Kepler's laws, and once again, Kepler was a mathematician and an astronomer, and we'll watch a little bit of history on him here in a minute because he kind of stole some ideas from others to kind of get this, and he got all the credit for it. But the major takeaway here today is just to understand that the distance of the foci are the length of the major axes, and so we're going to do an activity that kind of involves all of this. I hope you enjoyed this lesson today.